Turnbull Canyon had long been whispered about in hushed tones among the locals, a remote ravine cradled between steep, rugged hills, where time itself seemed to pause. The air carried a weight of sorrow and secrets, as if the land bore memories of ancient tragedies. In the years following the Second World War, rumors had taken root in the minds of those who called the nearby town home. It was said that the canyon was cursed. The origin of this dark reputation reached back even further than anyone cared to remember, to an era when a secretive cult once held clandestine rituals deep within the gnarled woods. These rites, performed in the dead of night beneath a silvered moon, ended in calamity, their participants vanishing without explanation and leaving behind a lingering sense of despair. Locals insisted that on certain wind-swept nights, the anguished cries of those lost in those grim ceremonies echoed across the canyon, a haunting reminder of a past that refused to be forgotten. On a brisk autumn evening in 1957, the sky was painted with a palette of deep purples and bruised reds as the sun set behind the ridges. A chill had begun to settle into the bones of the town, a whisper of winter that was not yet here. Against this unsettling backdrop, a group of teenagers conspired to test the legends for themselves. They were young and headstrong, driven by an irresistible blend of youthful daring and the lure of forbidden mysteries. To them, Turnbull Canyon was not just a repository of ghost stories, but a stage upon which to prove their bravery and defy the warnings of their elders. Among the quartet were Robert, Alice, Susan, and Michael. Robert, a steady and introspective young man with a keen eye for detail, had always been the voice of reason. Yet even his cautious nature was tinged with curiosity when faced with the unknown. Alice and Susan, best friends whose courage often bordered on recklessness, shared a bond that made even the darkest dare seem a little less forbidding. Michael, whose charm and irreverence often led him into trouble, was the de facto leader of their exploits. His mischievous smile belied a deep-seated need to conquer fear, a trait that, unbeknownst to them, would soon lead to irreversible consequences. The plan was hatched in secret, one stifled conversation in the back corner of the local soda shop, over milkshakes and the low hum of a radio playing the latest rock and roll hits. Michael laid out the idea. There's nothing out there but tall tales, right? Let's go to Turnbull Canyon. See if there's any truth to these ghost stories. Imagine the thrill of it. His eyes gleamed with mischief and a spark of genuine curiosity. Robert, though hesitant, agreed to accompany him. His logical mind couldn't dismiss the possibility that something real might lie hidden among the legends. Alice and Susan, ever the adventurers, were instantly on board, their hearts pounding with excitement and the promise of an unforgettable night. Before the moon climbed high into the star-strewn sky, the four friends set out on foot. Their route took them along winding back roads and through thick stands of aspen trees that shivered in the cool night breeze. The closer they drew to the canyon, the more palpable the sense of foreboding became. Local lore had painted a picture of Turnbull Canyon as a place where shadows moved with a life of their own, and where the wind carried voices that did not belong to this world. With every step, the whispers of the past seemed to intensify. The entrance to Turnbull Canyon was marked only by a narrow gap between ancient boulders. The teenagers paused at the threshold, their flashlights barely slicing through the inky black. In that moment, every story, every cautionary word from their elders rang clear in their minds. Yet, the pull of the unknown proved irresistible. With one shared nod, they stepped into the darkness. Inside the canyon, the atmosphere was oppressive. Towering cliffs pressed in from either side, their rocky faces worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Faint echoes of dripping water provided the only counterpoint to the pounding of their hearts. The beam of Robert's flashlight revealed sporadic remnants of old structures, rusted metal pieces, fragments of pottery, and cryptic symbols etched into stone. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves, a reminder of the relentless passage of time and the secrets buried within. As they ventured deeper, the path became less defined, a mere suggestion of a trail winding amid uneven ground and tangled undergrowth. Alice, whose curiosity often outweighed caution, took the lead, her eyes scanning every rock and crevice as if searching for a clue to the canyon's haunted past. Susan, though visibly anxious, kept pace with determined steps, her hand occasionally gripping Michael's arm in silent reassurance. Robert remained near the back, his mind racing with a mixture of excitement and dread, while Michael moved ahead with a bold, almost defiant stride, as if daring the darkness to reveal its true nature. Time lost all meaning in the labyrinthine depths of Turnbull Canyon. The friends soon found themselves at an open clearing, where the remnants of an ancient stone altar stood half swallowed by creeping vines. The structure was draped in shadows and mystery. Its carvings were indecipherable, and the symbols suggested a language long forgotten. A chill ran down their spines as they realized this was no ordinary relic. It was a monument to the rituals of a past era, a testament to the fervor and terror of those who had once worshipped here. The group gathered around the altar, their whispers merging with the murmuring wind. Michael's voice broke the silence, half in awe, half in challenge. "This is it, the heart of the legend. They say the spirits of the cult's victims still roam here. Imagine if we could catch a glimpse." His words sent ripples of both excitement and fear through the group. For a moment, even the ancient stones seemed to lean in, as if eager to divulge their secrets. They spread out in a semicircle around the altar, each one taking in the eerie surroundings. The air grew inexplicably colder, and the silence was punctuated by the distant sound of what might have been a lament, or perhaps it was just the wind. In that moment, the legends of cursed spirits and vengeful ghosts, once mere bedtime stories, seemed horrifyingly tangible. As the night deepened, strange phenomena began to occur. A soft, almost imperceptible humming resonated from the walls of the canyon, harmonizing with the rustling leaves and the distant drip of water. Shadows danced in the corners of their vision, and the light from their flashlights flickered as if unsettled by an unseen force. Robert's analytical mind struggled to rationalize these occurrences, yet every instinct told him that they had trespassed on a realm where logic no longer held sway. Alice, her voice trembling slightly, suggested, "Maybe we should document this. It could be proof that the legends are real." Susan, her eyes darting nervously around, nodded in agreement, though her hand trembled as she clutched her small notebook. Michael, ever the instigator, scoffed at the notion of fear, but couldn't help casting anxious glances over his shoulder. "Don't be ridiculous," he said, his tone trying to mask his inner unease. "Nothing's going to happen to us." Yet, as the minutes stretched into an eternity, the atmosphere grew increasingly oppressive. A low, mournful cry, barely audible at first, began to echo through the canyon. It was a sound that seemed to emanate from deep within the earth itself, a cry of agony and despair that set every nerve on edge. The friends exchanged worried looks, the once adventurous thrill now replaced with a creeping dread that clung to them like a second skin. In the midst of these unsettling events, a sudden commotion shattered the fragile calm. Michael, who had been inspecting a particularly ominous set of carvings on the altar, abruptly stopped. "Did you hear that?" he called out, his voice barely rising above a whisper. For a moment, there was silence, a pregnant pause, filled with the collective holding of breath before a piercing scream ripped through the darkness. It was a sound so raw and anguished that it froze time itself. Before anyone could react, Michael was gone. One moment he had been there, illuminated by the flickering beam of the flashlight, and the next he had vanished. Panic erupted. Robert's heart hammered in his chest as he called out, "Michael!" His voice cracked with a mix of disbelief and terror. Alice and Susan scrambled toward the spot where he had last been seen, their flashlights slicing through the darkness. But the area was empty, save for the echo of that last dreadful scream. They searched frantically along the narrow trail, calling his name into the oppressive silence. Every step they took seemed to plunge them deeper into a nightmare. The oppressive weight of the canyon pressed in, every rustle of leaves and distant groan of the wind magnified into ominous sounds. In the moments that followed Michael's disappearance, the canyon itself seemed to shift, its dark recesses deepening, its silence turning into a cacophony of sinister murmurs. Robert's logical mind reeled as he tried to explain the inexplicable. How could Michael simply vanish into thin air? Alice's eyes brimmed with tears as she recalled the man's confident smile moments before the scream, now replaced by a haunting memory of his final, desperate plea. Susan, though trembling uncontrollably, steeled herself with grim determination. "We have to find him," she said, her voice firm despite the quiver that betrayed her fear. "He wouldn't just leave us behind." With hearts pounding and adrenaline surging through their veins, the three survivors began a frantic search. The canyon, once a silent witness to the echoes of history, now roared with the sound of their desperate calls and the pounding of their frantic footsteps. Each turn in the rugged terrain brought them face to face with the unknown. Twisted roots protruding like skeletal hands, sudden drops that whispered of endless depths, and stone formations that seemed to shift in the dim light. Robert led the way, his flashlight beam jittering over the rocky ground as he tried to piece together clues from the scattered remnants of the past. Every shadow, every whisper of wind was a potential sign, a hint of where Michael might have gone. "He was here," Robert insisted, retracing their steps near the altar. "There's something here. I can feel it." His voice was steady even as the logical part of him screamed that this was beyond explanation. Alice's gaze lingered on the strange carvings etched into the rocks, their meanings long lost to time but now imbued with a sinister significance. "It's like these symbols are alive," she murmured, her hand brushing lightly over the cool stone. The carvings seemed to writhe under her touch, the lines and shapes twisting into forms that defied natural order. Susan, meanwhile, kept a careful eye on the darker recesses of the canyon, where the beam of her flashlight barely penetrated the gloom. "There's something down there," she whispered, pointing to a narrow passage that disappeared into a wall of tangled vines and jagged rocks. Reluctantly, they pressed on, their determination battling the mounting terror in every step. As they descended further into the canyon's depths, the oppressive atmosphere grew nearly unbearable. The low, mournful hum they had heard earlier returned, louder now, reverberating off the stone walls in a dissonant symphony of despair. It was as if the canyon itself was mourning the loss of its own secrets, a collective lament for the souls trapped within its confines. Hours seemed to pass as they scoured every crevice, every hidden alcove, but there was no sign of Michael. The haunting echoes of his final scream continued to taunt them, a reminder that time was slipping away and that the canyon's curse was very real. Desperation turned into dread as they realized that every moment spent searching was a moment spent deeper under the grip of this ancient evil. Their eyes stung with exhaustion, and the chill in the air began to seep into their bones as the reality of their predicament sank in. It was during one such moment, a pause to catch their breath in a shallow, rocky ledge, that they first noticed a change. In the distance, a dim, flickering light danced among the trees, moving with a deliberate rhythm. "Could that be?" Robert began, hope warring with fear in his voice. With no other leads, the three gathered their courage and followed the spectral glow. It led them through a twisting labyrinth of boulders and narrow passageways, the light pulsing like the heartbeat of the canyon itself. But as they drew closer, the glow revealed itself not as a guiding beacon, but as a distortion, a trick of the light perhaps, or a manifestation of something more sinister. The darkness swallowed their hopeful murmurs, and soon the light vanished altogether. In its place, the canyon's oppressive silence returned, heavier than before. The three survivors were left alone with their terror, and a nagging sense of failure that clung to them like a shroud. At long last, with the first hints of dawn beginning to brush the horizon with pale gold, Robert, Alice, and Susan emerged from the labyrinthine paths of Turnbull Canyon. Their faces were etched with grief and disbelief, their eyes haunted by the horrors of the night. Michael was gone, lost to a darkness that defied reason and defied rescue. The town, still sleeping in the early hours of the morning, would soon learn of their return, and with it, a new chapter would be written into the local lore. As they reached the outskirts of town, the early light revealed a mixture of relief and quiet terror on their faces. The survivors were met with a mixture of disbelief and pity from neighbors who had long feared the curse of Turnbull Canyon. Rumors spread like wildfire. Michael's disappearance became another thread woven into the tapestry of local legends. Some whispered that his soul had been claimed by the vengeful spirits of those who had perished in the ancient cult rituals, while others swore that his cries still echoed on windless nights. A mournful testament to the canyon's dark power. In the days that followed, each of the survivors grappled with the aftermath in their own way. Robert, ever the skeptic, struggled to reconcile the unexplainable events of that night with the rational world he had always known. He spent long hours poring over old records and local history, determined to find some shred of evidence that could explain Michael's fate. Yet the more he investigated, the more he found himself drawn into the canyon's mystery, a labyrinth of ancient lore and whispered curses that defied simple explanation. Alice, once vibrant and fearless, became withdrawn and haunted by nightmares. The image of Michael's final, terrified expression played repeatedly behind her closed eyes, a constant reminder of the night that had shattered her innocence. In quiet moments, when the wind howled just right, she could almost hear his voice calling out to her from the darkness, a plea for rescue that would never be answered. Susan, though outwardly composed, carried an invisible burden. Her dreams were filled with shifting images of the canyon, a living, breathing entity that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. She found herself drawn to the spot where Michael had vanished, as if the land itself was trying to communicate some final cryptic message. The incident at Turnbull Canyon left an indelible mark on the community as well. Parents warned their children of the cursed valley, and the local newspaper ran somber accounts of the tragedy that befell those daring enough to disturb the restless dead. In hushed gatherings, older residents recounted tales of eerie lights and ghostly figures seen in the depths of the canyon, insisting that the curse was as old as the land itself. Even as time marched on, the legend of Michael's disappearance persisted, a dark reminder of the boundaries between the known and the unknown. Years passed, and the memory of that fateful night began to blur at the edges, yet for those who had lived it, the terror remained as vivid as the chill of an endless winter night. Robert continued his research, his notebooks filled with sketches of the ancient altar and cryptic symbols. Despite his best efforts to rationalize the events, he could not shake the feeling that the canyon was a place where the boundaries between worlds had been torn asunder, a place where the past and present merged in a haunting dance of shadows. Alice, too, found herself unable to escape the ghost of that night. She left town soon after the incident, seeking solace in anonymity in distant places. But wherever she went, the memory of Michael's disappearance haunted her footsteps. In quiet moments, when the wind carried a certain melancholy tune, she could almost hear the echo of his final scream, a desperate, forlorn cry that seemed to reach out from the very heart of Turnbull Canyon. Susan remained behind, her determination hardened by the loss of her friend. She became something of a guardian of the town's dark lore, passing along the tale of Michael's vanishing to anyone who dared question the nature of the cursed canyon. On still nights, when the moon hung low and the wind whispered through the crooked branches of ancient trees, residents swore they could hear a solitary scream echoing from the direction of the canyon. The sound was both a warning and a lament, a spectral chorus that reminded them of a time when youthful bravado met the inexplicable, and the price of defiance was paid in blood and terror. For some, the scream was a call to caution. For others, it was an eternal lament for a soul lost in the murk of forgotten rituals. In the years since that fateful night in 1957, Turnbull Canyon had grown even more ominous in the collective imagination of the town. Occasional explorers, drawn by curiosity or the allure of confronting a curse, ventured into its depths only to return with tales of disembodied voices, sudden drops in temperature, and the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. But none ever found Michael, nor could they capture the intangible horror that had claimed him. The canyon, it seemed, had become a living repository of all that was inexplicable, and dark a place where the past secrets were never truly laid to rest. The remnants of old cult rituals, etched in stone and shadow, continued to beckon those who dared to unravel their mysteries. And every so often, when the wind was just right, a faint, agonized scream would drift over the hills, a reminder that some doors, once opened, were never meant to be closed. Thus, the legend of Turnbull Canyon endures a testament to the mysteries that lie hidden in forgotten places, and the eternal struggle between the desire to understand and the need to respect the boundaries of what should remain unseen. Michael's fate, enshrined in the whispers of the wind and the forlorn cry that haunts the night, remains an enduring enigma. For in Turnbull Canyon, every stone, every shadow, and every gust of wind speaks of a time when the line between life and death blurred, and one brave soul paid the ultimate price for daring to confront the unknown. Epilogue. On the anniversary of that tragic night, the town still holds a vigil, a quiet remembrance of a life lost and a mystery unsolved. Some say that if you stand at the edge of Turnbull Canyon under a full moon, you can see a faint silhouette wandering the rocky ledges, or even hear a distant, desperate cry carried by the wind. Whether these are mere echoes of memory or manifestations of an ancient curse remains a question that each listener must answer for themselves. For Robert, Alice, and Susan, the events of 1957 forged an unbreakable bond tempered by grief and the shared knowledge of a secret that could never be fully explained. They would often gather in quiet corners of the local diner, their conversations turning to hushed recollections of that night, each recollection a piece of a puzzle that defied resolution. They spoke of Michael not as a lost friend, but as a cautionary tale, a living reminder of the cost of challenging forces beyond our comprehension. As decades passed, the story of the vanishing at Turnbull Canyon became more than a local legend. It grew into a symbol of youthful daring and the inexorable pull of the unknown. New generations of teenagers, armed with modern gadgets and skeptical minds, would still whisper about the cursed canyon, daring each other to venture near its dark heart on moonlit nights. And though many believed the story to be nothing more than myth, every so often, a sudden, unexplainable noise, or a fleeting glimpse of movement in the shadows, would rekindle the old fears. In the quiet moments before dawn, when the world is suspended between sleep and wakefulness, the canyon's silence speaks volumes. The wind carries memories of lost voices, and the stones bear silent witness to the passage of time. Turnbull Canyon remains an eternal riddle, a place where legends are born, and every so often, the past reaches out in a final mournful cry. The legacy of that tragic night is woven into the very fabric of the canyon and the town that lies in its shadow. It is a reminder that some mysteries are not meant to be unraveled, and that in the pursuit of forbidden knowledge, one may awaken forces best left undisturbed. Michael's disappearance, echoing through the years, is both a warning and an enigma, a call to heed the ancient whispers that linger in the darkness, long after the light has faded. And so, when the wind howls through the hills on a cold, dark night, listen closely. In the echo of that forlorn scream, you might just hear the voice of a young soul who dared to challenge fate, a voice that calls out from the depths of Turnbull Canyon, urging us to remember that some mysteries should remain forever in the realm of shadows.